All right, welcome to the Pitwall Panic podcast. Tonight, it's going to be another night of talking about the news yet again. Um, we've got a lot going on news-wise this week, so why not? Um, but before we do that, if you watch us on Twitch, you can follow us over there. Right now, we're still having issues, still trying to figure out what's going on with that. Uh, Something's going on with the encoder, so that's being difficult. Unfortunately, it's dropping like 70% frame rate. So once I figure that out, we will be back on over there. That being said, you can follow us on TikTok, you can follow us on X, you can follow us on YouTube, all the great places. Um, TikTok might become one of our more streamed places for the time being. That being said, we're gonna go ahead and get into this week. Been a lot going on. Not as much silly season stuff as I expected. Sadly enough, some stuff I kind of expected, some stuff that's really nothing. Um, but at the end of the day, it is what it is. So I guess first place we're gonna start at is there's an article that came out 2 days ago. It's talking about the points that Mercedes has lost due to reliability issues, and that's been a major, major concern so far this season. Uh, it's been kind of ridiculous how bad they have been as far as reliability goes. You have one of the top cars on the grid, and it's just an absolute nightmare because you can't keep the car on track. Russell DNF'd in Canada due to engine failure. Uh, at Barcelona, Kimi Antonelli DNF'd due to, again, power unit trouble. Um, Claiming, the big issue is overdriving the car. I don't buy that. That shouldn't be an issue. Um, the other one that we saw. So we're at, let's see, 25, 18. Let me just pull up a calculator real quick here. Pull up the calculator app. Let's do some quick math here, folks. All right, so 25, 18. We saw a P15 finish from Kimi that he was at least going to finish second. Arguably, you could say that he could take the fight to Charles, but there's no guarantee. So let's say 18 points due to the fact that there's no guarantee that at the end of the day he would actually get around Charles. So far, we're at 61 points that have been lost. At Hungary, we had a P7 out of Russell that was due to some battery issues, I believe is what it was, actually in the race. But, he didn't, or no. Yeah. So it lost another 2 points there. According to this article, anyways. That's, we're at 63 points that they've lost. Now let's look at the standings, right? And oh, I clicked not what I want to. When you look at the team standings, there's only a 73-point difference, 72-point difference between Ferrari and Mercedes. They're left 63 points on the table. So let's look here. If they've left 63, if they hadn't lost those 63 points, we're at 135-point difference. Now, granted, Charles did DNF twice here. So, I mean, it's hard to say that they'd still be at this point because at the same time, you could say, well, what if Charles didn't DNF? we're sitting here at 135 points that could have been the deficit between Mercedes and Ferrari. Right now, we're at a 72-point deficit, though, and that's very easily coverable. This is so coverable that we could see, two DNFs for Mercedes, and all of a sudden Ferrari's back in the fight. After the ADUO stuff came out, Toto said, "Oh, we're not going to take an engine upgrade," and now he's talking about taking one for reliability. Well, if you take reliability, does it slow the engine down? Does it slow the power unit down? Does that make it to where Ferrari is in this fight? And if so, does Ferrari pass Mercedes? Is this a possibility? I think Kimi's pretty locked in to win the driver's title. I genuinely question, can Ferrari end up in the driver's seat of the championship? And I think it's actually plausible. I know a lot of people don't want to admit that. A lot of Mercedes fans are like, no, that's not going to happen. But either you run into reliability issues, or you bring in this engine upgrade and it fixes it, or it makes the engine worse. We won't know yet. So there's no way you could say Ferrari's out of the fight at this point. This is not realistic to say that. Now, there's some very other interesting comments that I have seen in articles. So, one of these articles is Valtteri Bottas believes that his best years are still yet to come. How can you say that your best years are to come when you were with the Mercedes dynasty? When you were winning races and winning podiums or on podiums and winning races, and you haven't done that since you left Mercedes. You didn't do it at Williams. And before anybody says, well, it's a Williams. Well, Sainz did it. Did he not? He put it on the podium last season. So we can't say that. He didn't do it at Sauber. It was a Sauber, but at the end of the day, it is what it is. I don't see how Bottas can say his best years are still to come. He's not beating his teammate this season, head to head. Anyways, let's go back to standings real quick. Look at drivers. Oh, he is okay. I take that back. He is beating his teammate, but neither one of them have points, so it's kind of pointless, anyways. I don't know. Like I said, he's beating his teammate, which kind of surprised me. I don't know. I'm torn. Before in the preseason, I said I thought that Bottas would beat out Perez, and everybody said, "Oh no, there's no way that's going to happen." Well, it looks like it is happening, and is going to continue to be that way. There's no telling what's going to happen. Cadillac can't seem to keep the car from catching on fire, so it's ultimately at this point who keeps the car on the track the longest. I don't know. I'm not feeling great about that. It's interesting, though. If Bottas were to leave Cadillac, where would he go? I don't see him going to Audi because I think Audi wants Sainz. Maybe he goes back to Williams, but Williams might bring in a young talent. He's not going to Mercedes. He's not going to Ferrari. He's not going. I don't see him going to Red Bull. I mean, if there was a last-ditch effort, maybe there. He's not going to Alpine. I don't see Haas going for him. Maybe Aston Martin. I just don't. Williams or Aston Martin, I think, are the only two potential places that he could go. But I think Aston Martin, if Fernando leaves, might go with Yuki. But I don't know. It depends on if Yuki ends up going to Haas, which I think is a real possibility. There's a lot of question marks there, but I don't see Bottas, unless Cadillac just gets their act together at some point in the near future. I don't see him being able to go to another team, and I don't see him being able to say, well, my best years are still ahead of me, when you haven't looked great. Granted, the car is holding him back a lot, but he doesn't look like someone that is on the up and up and making a comeback. Now, Perez has done phenomenal in a few races, and supposedly there's teams that have been talking to him. I don't know. I don't see it. Now the other part of this is Kamara, who has been talking to Haas, um, at least supposedly talking to Haas, is now his camp is talking to Cadillac. So, with that being said, what does that say about the situation with Haas? I don't see him going to talk to Cadillac if there's still potential of him going to Haas. Because unless you're just not wanting to put all your eggs in one basket, in which case I still don't know if I'm going to go Cadillac. And the reason I don't know if I'd go Cadillac is we've had let's look at results. We've had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 races. And Cadillac has DNF'd like 7 or 8 of those races. I wouldn't want to go to Cadillac. That might just be me, but I sure wouldn't want to go to Cadillac if I had another team as an option. I think that's the interesting one. My question is, why is he not talking to Williams? Because there seems to be a clear possibility that Sainz leaves and goes to Audi. We've heard this rumor. We have not heard anything saying this is there's nothing putting out the fire. Let me put it that way. And what I mean by that is there was rumors that Oscar was unhappy with McLaren and wanted to leave McLaren. McLaren came out and said, no, this isn't true. A couple days later, Oscar came out and said, this isn't true. There's been these rumors that Sainz wants to leave and might go to Audi. I have not heard a single word that says otherwise. Williams Valls has not come out, from what I understand, and said no, that's not happening. I haven't heard that Sainz has come out and said no, that's not happening. So it seems like that's a real possibility. Now I may have missed something. I will say that. That's the caveat. I may have missed something. But from my understanding, it's a real possibility. So if that's the case, if you're Kamara, I understand that Cadillac is running a Ferrari engine. Would you not rather go to Williams? That the car is not great, but at least it finishes. The car is overweight. The car is super slow. The car is awful, but at least it's finishing. And the car has finished in the points a couple times. Every weekend that Cadillac has a car run all the laps is a great weekend for them because they seem to have terrible brake issues. Which, if they don't have that figured out coming out from the midseason break, I have bigger question marks, bigger concerns. Now, while we're talking about the potential driver market right now, we have to talk about Fernando Alonso. The last thing that I saw was that he is essentially not locked in with Aston Martin yet. The silly season continues there in the sense that he might leave. It's coming down to, can he get money? He's negotiating more money. If he doesn't get the money, I think he leaves. I think rightfully so because he doesn't have too many years left, and Aston Martin is kind of turned into a joke at the moment. They looked super strong this last weekend of racing in Hungary, but will that continue? What happens when the new Honda engine comes in, the new power unit comes in? These are big question marks, and I think these are going to be the deciding factors on whether Fernando Alonso stays at Aston Martin. But I don't know. And is he looking for an excuse to leave Aston Martin? I think it's very possible because who wants to be at a team that has no hope, especially when your career is winding down and your name is Fernando Alonso and you have 2 championships and you can use that as leverage to go somewhere else, and you have a team like Alpine who has a decent car, a good midfield car that Fernando Alonso could probably put on some podiums, that is rumored to be wanting to go after him. And again, like what we said with Carlos Sainz, there's been no squashing of this rumor that Briatore wants him. We know that Briatore was at Renault when Fernando Alonso was there and won his championship, so we know that they have a relationship. We know that they are friends. So would it be surprising? Absolutely not. It would not surprise me in the slightest if he decided to go to Alpine. Then again, who takes that spot? I really want to know who locks in at Haas. If Yuki gets passed up for Haas, I see Yuki going to Aston Martin. But I think Yuki's going to want to go to Haas over Aston Martin because the car at Haas seems better at the moment. But then again, it's Haas, and they just go backwards. Whereas it seems like Aston Martin's taking the steps forward. It could be a situation where you go, okay, I see the progress they're making. Let me go there, and then that shoots you in the foot. But I don't know. That would be the hardest decision if I was Yuki and there was a possibility of either team. He's a good driver. I think he got the short end of the stick at Red Bull. I think a lot of people are holding that over him. They're saying, look at what went blank, what Hadjar's doing. Let's talk about what Hadjar's doing and blame Yuki because Hadjar's obviously doing it. Hadjar's in a different car. Yuki was in a ground effect error car before a regulation change that was solely, supposedly anyways, solely around Max. Multiple drivers said that. So with that being said, Yuki was doomed to fail from the beginning. And when Moral Mekis came in and took over from Christian Horner, and they finally gave Yuki the upgrades that they had given Max, we saw a big difference from Yuki. What would have happened if Yuki was still in this car? We'll never know, but I think he would have had a decent season. So, do you go somewhere like Aston Martin, who seems to be progressing and has a driver or has a engineer like Newey, who can give you a better car, but your teammate is Lance Stroll, or do you go to a team like Haas, where you're up against a young superstar in Oliver Bearman, and a car that starts strong and historically falls off? I don't know, because if you go with Lance Stroll, your own teammate's likely to take you out. If you go with Haas, it's very easy to fall into the shadow of Oliver Bearman and turn into the next Ocon. And if that happens, I think his career is done, and he's not getting a shot at another team. But I do think he has the potential to end up back on the grid and look good. It's just hard to say for Yuki. I just think he does end up on the grid with all these moves that might happen. Now, we've talked about the potential of Sainz leaving Williams and going to Audi. The next big question is what happens with valves. I think Williams has been very, very, very patient with James Vowles. He was able to sign Carlos Sainz, and I think that saved him a little bit longer. And this car was supposed to be a rocket ship, all things considered, for Williams, because when you're talking Williams, it's been a long time since they've been a dominant team. But in 2025, they did not do any development to the car. They only worked on the 2026 chassis and the 2026 car. And then it came out and the car was overweight. It came out and the car is super slow. It came out that there's issues going on within Williams. So how long does Vowles have before he gets the axe at Williams? And I don't know if it's all his fault. I don't know if we can all put all the blame on James Vowles, but I do think he should be feeling some pressure right now. Now, if I was Vowles, what I would be trying to do is get out of there and go to either Aston Martin, who has a technical engineer or head of technical as the team principal, or I would try to go to Audi. As many of y'all know, I am not a Binotto fan. I think that he is the reason why Audi is doing so bad because they looked really strong with Jonathan Wheatley there, and since Binotto's taken over, the teams look like a joke, quite frankly. So I think you bring Vowles in there, and maybe it gets better. I don't know how it gets much worse. Put Binotto at technical director or whatever he was doing before he took over as team principal. Anything but team principal. But I think Vowles should be very worried about his job. I do not see him being at Williams much longer and potentially even in F1. In which case, where does he go? I don't know. But he's not staying at Williams. It's not happening. Let's see here. We are in a very interesting state in F1 in 2026, I believe. I believe that something has to happen where people have to catch up with Mercedes. I think that there's certain teams that have to make some major changes, like Aston Martin, which they seem to be doing. We have Williams, who needs to make some major changes, and I think that's getting rid of Vowles at this point. We have teams like not Aston Martin, I just said them. Audi, who need to make adjustments because you have a driver like Nico Hulkenberg, who has a ton of experience, and Gabby Bortoleto has a ton of talent, and you're squandering them because the team is just falling apart and not doing stuff right. And I think that is ultimately because of the team principle. Then the other thing for Haas. Haas is in an interesting situation with an interesting dynamic. Behrman came out this week and said his goal is still to be at Ferrari, but he warns he cannot waste his best years waiting. Meaning, he knows that they're not going to get rid of Lewis, because who would? But he can't stay there forever. Now, could we see him go somewhere like Red Bull? Again, there's been rumors that Red Bull has talked to Behrman. There's been nothing to disprove these rumors or say, no, this is not true. So could we see Behrman potentially go to Red Bull, and when Lewis leaves, end up at Ferrari? I think it's possible. It'd be interesting, unless he gets in somewhere, gets settled in, gets comfortable, and just sticks it out there. I just don't know where he would go if he were to leave Haas. He's not gonna go. You don't leave Haas to go to Cadillac. You don't leave Haas to go to Aston Martin. He's not gonna go to Alpine because I think the only way they drop Colapinto is if Alonso says he's gonna go there. Audi seems to want Sainz. I don't see you leaving Haas to go to Williams. He's not gonna go to VCarb. So he's not going to go to McLaren. So the only options really are go to Ferrari when they let Lewis go. Red Bull if Max decides to leave. But that's really it. At least moves that make sense. And he could stick around for a little while longer and see what shakes out next year, year after next. But he's going to be on a contract extension this season, I believe. Yeah, because this is the end of his second season. His contract was for 2 years. So he'll be at the end of this one. If he stays with Haas this year, that means he's staying there for 2027 and more than likely 2028. Unless he does some weird long contract like we saw with Charles to Ferrari, which I just don't see happening. So I don't know. It's interesting that he's coming out and saying this now, which makes me really wonder what's up next. He said in this article, things have changed a lot in the last 6 months. As an F1 fan and a Lewis fan as well, it's pretty cool to see him performing at the level he is, and seeing him on the top step in Barcelona was quite a special moment for British F1 in general. It was 3 Brits on the podium and the best British driver. Best driver we've seen in P1. That's something pretty special, of course. In terms of my future, that's not ideal, but I'm still young. I'm only 21, I'm not in a huge rush, and for me, staying at Haas for the foreseeable is not a bad thing. I feel that there's a lot to learn from this or at this team. There's a lot to still achieve. I really want to get back to those highs which we tasted in Mexico and other events. I feel like they're on a good trajectory, this team, and I'm really happy to be on the journey with it. It's a tough moment right now, and it's really challenging one, and one that builds character, I would say. But I don't want to be defined as the team had a really good first year with me, but then we really struggled to achieve that performance again. So hopefully we can get a bit more performance and score some good points again. Here's the other question: if he stays here, he's had a strong season. What happens if he doesn't replicate that? Does that lose stock in Oliver Bearman? Or does everybody just chalk it up to Haas being Haas? That's the hard one. And he knows that Lewis is performing. So where do you go? He said, of course, very much committed to Ferrari, to what Ferrari have offered me. They've supported me since the very beginning, since I joined F3, and I'm only sitting here thanks to them. So on one side, I owe a lot to Ferrari. For me, Ferrari is the dream team, not only because I'm part of Ferrari, but because just because it's the most iconic brand in the world. So my goal remains to be at Ferrari, a Ferrari driver one day. That at the moment, in this case, we need to see how things develop. Of course, I don't want to be sitting around for 3, 4, 5 years waiting for his seat to become available. And then he mentions there's no guarantees. He's got his head on his shoulders and he's thinking right. And I hate to say that because I love Oliver Bearman and I'm a huge Ferrari fan. And I'd love to see him at Ferrari. But Lewis has come out and said that he sees his future being in F1 for the next 5 years. And he's performing. So Ferrari's not going to get rid of him. Or would it make sense for them to get rid of him? And where does that leave Bearman? At Haas. Haas is doing good, but unless Haas really develops this car, it doesn't make sense for him to stay. Now, there's a caveat to this. I think there's a potential that Gene Haas wants out of F1 simply because he's downsized a lot in NASCAR, and Gene Haas is money hungry and not making money in F1 that much. That being said, I think Toyota wants to buy Haas out. And I could be completely wrong and they're fine with just being a title sponsor. But I think they want to buy Haas. They have shown, oh gosh, what was his name? It was a Japanese driver that filled in during the free practice sessions as a rookie because he's never actually driven in F1, but he's driven for Toyota in multiple different series. I feel like they were sending him out there to test the car out, see what they think of the car, get a feel for everything going on. I really wonder, is Toyota about to try to buy Haas? I think it's possible. They just came in as a title sponsor, I think, last season, if I remember correctly. So it'd be interesting to see if they do. And then if they do, I think Toyota throws more money into the team than Gene Haas ever has. In which case, if you wait it out and that happens, you could end up on a really strong team to at least wait around on until Ferrari is available for you. And then you could be fighting for podiums while you're waiting to take Lewis's seat. And you're not at Red Bull, who has been known not care what other drivers have to say. If you're not the lead driver, you're not making us money, you're not scoring us points. Who cares? It's a really tough situation, though, if you're Bearman, because you can't waste your best years waiting for a team that you don't know when you're going to have that possibility. And here's the thing about racing. You could be on the top of the world 1 second and out of a seat the next. So it's very likely that at any time he loses a seat because of an accident or whatever you may have. It's not, I mean, you look at Japan. There is a high possibility there that if he rear ends Colapinto, there's a lot of damage done to both drivers. And who knows? It may not have killed him, but it may have ended his career. And if you're Behrman, that might be the worst thing that could happen because wasted an opportunity to go to a bigger team because you were waiting around for Ferrari. You wasted your potential to win races because you were waiting around for Ferrari. And I don't think anybody wants to see that for him because Behrman is so likable. He's a good kid. He's got his head on his shoulders. He thinks smart. He's weighing out his options. He's not being impulsive. People want to see him succeed. And I think people want to see him succeed as much as people wanted to see Kimi Antonelli succeed. And there's a lot of that. There is a lot of people that want to see Kimi succeed. And I think, like I said, we have just as much of that going on for Oliver Behrman. And I would love to see him succeed as well. I just don't know if it's going to happen at Haas because Gene Haas never seems to throw any money into this team. And I don't know that he ever will, quite frankly. Now, personally, I am ready for I am completely ready for the season to come back. I have been bored out of my mind. I've been watching the older races. I want to see Zandvoort and see what Honda is going to do. I think that is my most anticipated part of the weekend. Yes, I would love to see Ferrari win a race again, being a Ferrari fan. Yes, I would love to see something special happen and Mercedes lose the race. Whether it's McLaren, whether it's Ferrari, whether it's Red Bull, I don't care. It'd be nice to see a different team win. It would be nice to see Max win in Zandvoort, so it's at home. Potentially, they're still on the table. This is his last season in F1, and he decides to leave all the way around. In which case, it would be awesome to see him win his last race at home. Not to mention, Zandvoort is coming off the calendar. Don't forget that. I believe it's 2027 that it's coming off the calendar. So, we don't know if it comes back in 5 years. We don't know if it comes back in 15 years. We don't know if it comes back at all. In which case, this could be Max's last chance to race in F1 at home. So it would be nice to see that. But I think the most we have not seen, I said this last week, it's been since like the 1980s since an Adrian Newey car has not been on the podium at least once in a season. I would love to see that Honda gives them this engine that they can finally compete with, and you have this chassis developed by Adrian Newey that they just finished upgrading and seems a lot better, and all of a sudden we have Fernando Alonso fighting for podiums. It would be absolutely phenomenal to see this continuation of a streak like we have never seen before from any engineer, any technical designer, anything of this nature. Who has this longevity that Adrian Newey has as far as on the technical side? I can't think of anybody else that has been as successful as him. And it would be awesome to see it continue. I think it at this point comes down to the ADUO, how Honda develops this engine, and then how Newey makes the car complement the engine. We saw a lot of good things happen in Hungary. Can it continue? They went P13 and P14. And you go, well, that doesn't sound great. Well, when you're fighting for P21 and P22, when everybody's on the grid, P13 and P14 is phenomenal. I'm just saying. I'm just throwing that out there. That is in a world that we didn't expect this season. And I would love to also just not look a fool because in preseason testing, I said I think that Adrian Newey was going to build a car that was going to be fighting for potential podiums, and it's been far from that. So I would love for something to happen so I don't look crazy saying that earlier this season when people go back and watch our old videos. Just saying. I would also like to Williams, just because if you're in the Discord, you know why. And same thing from preseason rankings. I don't know what the most exciting part of Zandvoort is, but I think there's going to be a lot that happens, and I think Zandvoort's going to be the start of silly season as far as the drivers go. I feel like Signs is probably behind closed doors telling Vals, look, this has to be better. I have a month to develop this car. If I don't see improvement, I'm going to Alpine. Not Alpine. Going to Audi. I think Fernando Alonso is telling uh, Adrian Newey the same thing. Look, I know we've had great improvement here, but it's not enough. If it was enough, I think he would have already sealed the deal and signed a contract for 2027. But I think that he wants to wait and see what comes from this Honda power unit. And if it's not enough, I don't think he stays, personally. I think those are the two big moves that we see coming. I'm honestly surprised we haven't heard anything from Haas on Ocon. I think after the midseason break, if they come back with a good car and he drops the ball yet again in Zandvoort, I think Ocon is out then. These are kind of all the predictions that I'm making right now. Other drivers in the hot seat. I think if Alonso goes to Alpine, Colapinto goes to Williams. I think he goes back to Williams. I think Sainz goes where Hulkenberg is. And I think Hulkenberg might be forced into retirement, as much as I hate to say that. I think that if Zandvoort is an absolute disaster for Max, we might get the announcement of Max's retirement. He's been very, I don't want to say patient because it's Max. He's not very patient. He's been very clear that he's not happy with the car. A lot of terrible things with this car has gone on, and he's just kind of dug his heels in and continued to push through it. But I don't know. It'd be very interesting to see, and I don't know who could take his spot. You're not going to take Lindblad. He's too young. It wouldn't make sense. I think you'd be setting him up for failure. You don't take Lawson back because that's just not what Red Bull does. Red Bull is very, very, very adamant on you get one shot, you blow it, goodbye. Otherwise, I think they would go to Albon over either one of the V Carb drivers because he's had a fairly decent few seasons with V Carb, or not V Carb, with Williams. Or you would go with Carlos Sainz, who started off in the Red Bull Junior program, had a phenomenal career at Ferrari, had a decent career at McLaren, has put the Williams where it doesn't belong on several occasions, multiple podiums in that Williams, but there's no sign of that. It's a very interesting thing on what could happen if Zandvoort goes wrong for a few teams. I think they have to have a strong Zandvoort to keep the drivers they have and the drivers that they want and to see the success that they want in the future. I could be completely wrong because I also said that I thought we'd be seeing a lot of moves during this this mid-season break, and we haven't seemed to be having any. It's just been kind of quiet, honestly, and it's kind of surprising. And I don't know why. I don't have any idea as to why it's been so quiet. I feel like when Drive to Survive comes out, we're going to find out that there was a whole lot going on behind closed doors. And we're going to look at this midseason break and go, wow, things were imploding. That's what was going on. But until then, we don't really have an idea. That being said, we're going to stop a little short tonight. There wasn't as much news as I expected. It was a really quiet week. Really quiet week. Neither one of my co-hosts were able to make it tonight, so we didn't get to bounce anything off of each other. I really wanted to talk about the situation with Cadillac. So maybe within the next couple of weeks, I'll get them on and we'll talk about that. I think it's very, very interesting to talk about the fact that They know the issue they have, which is cooling the brakes, yet they can't seem to figure out something that simple. Um, I think they had the most to gain from the midseason break, and I want to talk about that. And I think Aston Martin's probably the next team that has the most to gain from a midseason break. But with that being said, thank y'all for watching. Thank you for hanging out with us. If you're watching on TikTok, thank you for hanging out with us. Get ready for more of this in the future, especially while Twitch is having issues. Follow us on Twitch, TikTok, X. Subscribe on YouTube. Catch us live on Sundays at 8:30 usually. We were a little behind tonight. The recording goes up at 12 o'clock noon Eastern time on Mondays. Like I said, it was a little short this week. Sorry for that. Hopefully we have some better discussion in the future. Just let me know what y'all think of what's going on. Comment, let us know. Join the Discord, have some fun with us. Yet again, thank you.